How do we keep grace when we receive it? That question itself is wrongly configured, man. You can't keep grace. Grace is not an object. You see? You can't keep grace. You can't build on grace either. Solar panels exist. Yes, you can utilize sunlight. That is possible. It's a technology. But in terms of technology of consciousness, you can only be transformed by grace. You can only give yourself to grace. You cannot take anything from grace. When that understanding dawns, then you begin to live life as that wandering tower or wandering Sufi. Just like for the Taoist, the one who doesn't want anything will receive it all. Guidance in a reframed existence. It comes from Maximian, and there's a short background. I was a rising professional in New York City finance, advising on global hospitality, mergers and acquisitions, when an unexpected layoff left me distraught. 2 weeks later, alone in my studio, I was drawn into a spontaneous Kriya experience, flowing asanas, radiant visuals, and the emergence of a goddess-like form and face upon mine. As her voice asked, "Do you trust me?" I surrendered, catapulted into the cosmos as infinite consciousness. This transformative experience reframed my existence, shifting my focus from vapid pursuits to daily spiritual practice, building inner Shakti. Now I feel called to re-enter the transactional world with a deeper divine alignment, but very little luck. Here are 3 questions with regard to this. For those like me, rock stars rebuilding amidst destabilization, how do we pick up the pieces and navigate the delicate bridge of congruence, ultimate surrender versus active manifestation? How do we keep grace when we receive it and even build on it? I often catch myself veering off as the grass is always greener on the other side. And final question, when you feel like you know what you want to do as a next step as per Dharma and are only mere inches away, but nothing materializing, what then? Your guidance on all things Kundalini, as always, is a North Star. Thank you. Well, thank you for the trust in turn. Let's look into this. This is very important, profoundly important question here. Several questions, but effectively speaking, it can be seen under that overview of what happens in our lives when we have, let's say, been kissed by divine grace, when something reveals within itself, as it is very clearly here, very concisely and to the point, put in the form of that background. What is then? How do we measure our abilities? How do we, so to speak, progress in life? I'm using this with an inverted commas because the term progress has to be utilized here with a pinch of salt. So I don't want to rush with this question because I think this question, one way or another, relevant to most of us, or will be relevant to some of us, certainly to those who are faced with that dilemma of how to meet ends when it comes to this, what is now quite frankly summarized already in the last sentence of the background before even moving into questions. I feel called to re-enter the transactional world with a deeper divine alignment, but very little luck. So, what to do? What to do? What's the solution? Is there a magic formula? Is there online course out there that one can take? How to manifest one's desires, even if coming from the highest, let's say, aspiration, steeped in the intention to uplift humanity and all the rest of it? It is tempting, of course, to go straight to the core of the matter. But I think, due to the importance of this question, I feel like maybe first give us that transition between, let's say, what actually happening and what one experiencing through the analogy of the dilemma every single artist is faced with. Okay, fine, you may not relate to being an artist, right? But I'm speaking about it in terms of how this is relevant, because whether you believe it or not, that dilemma of the true artist faces at some point, sooner or later, is with regard to the utmost integrity of why one is an artist in the first place, and how that sits with regard to the expression and all that what goes under the, let's say, language of making a living. Even if making a living means selling millions of records, as back in the days when the record industry was still at its height. Every single artist out there, visual artist, performing artist, recording artist, whatever artist, had to face squarely that dilemma of what is what, why are they doing this, and what are they prepared to sacrifice. This is not a trivial thing. You'd be surprised how many people out there who started with a tremendous degree, tremendous reservoir of creative potential, only to become commercially disposed version of themselves. And I'm speaking about now, it doesn't matter whether the artist is not known to the public unless you Google his name, or a household name, whether this is a recording artist in terms of the one who gave us some of the most beautiful music, lyrics, or performances. This dilemma has to be faced, whether in one's early 20s or in one's mid-30s or whatever, whenever that is, in early 40s, late 40s, this has to be faced. What am I doing here? And what am I prepared to settle on? What you'd be surprised is that very few people out there have the capacity to understand the true nature of creative process. And therefore, they capitulate before they even made any attempts at seeing what can be done to face that which is nothing short of a true challenge life throws at us, where we are asked to protect that creative genius we've been touched with, and that's what gives us the propensity, the confidence, the impetus to begin to express ourselves in a certain way. And we think that we can just capitalize on that what success here provides. And by the way, when I spoke about it, I should have mentioned this dilemma comes primarily when we smell or touch or enjoy the degree of success. This is when artists are put squarely face to face against that dilemma. I've seen this in my nearly 60 years of life, and also historical examples plenty, how some artists, they could not rise to that level of integrity where creativity remained to be the holy cow, and they did not make the pact with themselves a la Faust and Mephistopheles. They remained true to themselves. Whereas majority preferred to have the fat check through the door as that reassurance, and the question of settling this was basically bypassed. The result, deterioration of creative processes, and it is absolutely impossible. It doesn't matter. I'm sticking with the recording artist because it's the most apparent, you see. If you give examples of literature, maybe it will take someone who is more of a connoisseur or more well-read to distinguish at what point the favorite author went off the track, or when painter, an artist, visual artist, work began to get that tint of compromise. Again, this may be down to some very specific arbitrary parameters. But when it comes to the recording, you can see that very quickly. How some artists, performing artists, there and then, slide into the preferred tastes, followed with something else. So the creativity was no longer what was in the first place giving them that life lived at the fullest. You cannot retrace that. It's almost as if that dilemma of the Faust and Mephistopheles, why it is so profound and why it is so universal, is once you go into that dilemma, once you pass that threshold, it's almost like you will not be given second chance. So with this example given, that transitory example, as I said, it's kind of like concession-driven example. Now to the point, so finance, right? Professional, the world of numbers, figures, deals. How do you rebuild yourself? Where do you see yourself? What the field of action you want to sow seeds into, where you want to see fruits of your actions. If this, what clearly here as that encounter with grace has been accompanied by fullness of that realization, it should have given you a taste of the true wealth to such degree that no possibility is left for any kind of rational dismissal of, yeah, I know it all, but life today, the bills and the way we want to live life, and we've never been in a history of time when being super wealthy and very quick is being considered to be as the highest achievement of human spirit. In fact, it's the lowest phase in my understanding, at least in my, I admit, perhaps limited experience and exposure to this. It's the lowest time where we are exchanged ourselves at such a poor level. So before I build that further, if you think Elon Musk is a very wealthy man, or some people refer to him as a super wealthy man, then you need to think again. Elon Musk, in fact, is simply happened to have a lot of numbers, equities. I don't see wealth in fully all-encompassing meaning of that term. Certainly the term affluence doesn't apply there. And he is maybe the epitome, as an example, of financial success. There are some other figures, lesser known, but certainly more known to you. Whatever nationalities they are, Spanish, Japanese, Indian, whatever the nationalities and countries and cultures they belong to, right? I've learned, for example, the other day that the magnate who found Uniqlo, Japanese company, which is makes the most affordable and purportedly the most wearable, also reliable in terms of the time and quality clothes, is one of the wealthiest men in fashion, full stop. His empire exceeds many, many times any of the more known names in terms of numbers. Does that make him the most successful man in the retailing business of selling clothes, making clothes and selling? Yes, it certainly does. Translating this into the understanding of life lived from the level of affluence, that is not guaranteed. That is not truly a measure of his affluence. I'm putting my reputation on a line in a way, in my own small way, to declare that someone like Elon Musk is not at all feeling affluent in a full sense. Because if it was, I think his influence and his interest would be in different areas. So far, I can see that it is still continued attempts at compensating for some lack. You see? So where am I going with all this? Because you have three distinctive questions. How do we pick up the pieces and navigate the delicate bridge of congruence, okay? Ultimate surrender versus active manifestation. So now more to your questions. You have to realize, actually, among all the people gathered perhaps here, more than anyone else, particularly if you deal with finances, that it boils down to how you feel already in your bone marrow. If you feel in your bone marrow that you are that, in other words, if instead of just the mere bone marrow, you have a molten gold, like a molten ghee of consciousness, then you are inexhaustibly wealthy. In other words, you understand the true affluence and the true measure of success of human enterprise. And from that place, anything you do is no longer measured by success or failure. It's no longer measured by achievement, but purely by creative enterprise of what you are willing to invest your time and energy. Doesn't that sound familiar to you in terms of the investments per se? And this is not an abstract language. To support that, I want to tell you this. You have to make and find your way to our nearest program in Mexico, because during the 10-day live program, we are not only going to give this to the exposure to, let's say, what we already announced as what Kashmir Shaivism is known for in terms of the 36 tattvas of creation. In other words, manifestation in Trika Shaivism, manifestation as seen through the philosophy of Kashmir Shaivism. But to tie it all in to the practical, let's say, matters of here and now, we will be dealing with manifesting in the light of understanding of that what manifestation itself is, because obviously it's all interlinked and interconnected. So yes, there are direct techniques at achieving, direct techniques even, methods at achieving one's objectives. You might be surprised, or if you are that bright, you may not need to come to the immersion at all. And I can just, without hiding it, point it out straight to you. Study Patanjali Sutras well enough, and you'll find it all clearly written there how to do it. Can you do it? It's another question, because you do need guidance there. But it's all there in the sutras. In the sutras of the largest pada called Vibhuti, where all these techniques explained with minute precision. But how you will work with that, you see? So this is just as that addition, let's say, into the question that you're asking here, where ultimate surrender overlaps with active manifestation, so that you know, yes, you can gear towards, let's say, grokking that cosmic code of how it functions and work from that level. With that being said, don't be surprised if during the acquisition of this, which is nothing short of being powers, because that's what they are. Vibhuti are powers, whether they are called siddhis, whether they're called supernormal powers, whether they're truly supernormal or just supernormal based on our average abilities, beside the point. They are powers. And guess what's the most important power there? It's the power of seeing the object shines in its true essence. That's the definition of true seeing. So when the essence of an object, whatever is an object of your desire, happens to be, is shown to in the light of what it represents, you might change your mind there and then. In other words, one can give you a huge cabochon size looking diamond, and when you examine it, and even on the way to the jewelry maker or the connoisseur who's supposed to appraise that stone, you have a funny feeling that this is nothing but a piece of glass, only to get that confirmed by specialist, that what you have been really putting all your attention on, in fact, is not what it presents itself. This is why there are degrees, stages in terms of what you want to manifest into your life when it comes to the utilization of your highest asset. And what is your highest asset? Your highest asset is that. Just as for every artist, the highest asset is the creative capacity. Creativity per se. Creativity. So this is, you see, yes, there are methods, yes, there are techniques, methodologies to achieve or manifest what you really want. But on the way of applying that methodology, when you see the object of your desire truly for what it is, that revelation puts us squarely in touch with the spiritual dimension, whether we want it or not. So in other words, there is no way to outsmart and utilize spiritual powers for benefiting oneself in worldly affairs, because that is an oxymoron to begin with. It means one did not understand anything in the first place, or the remake did not happen. Reflect on this, please. Everyone, reflect on this, why that is. If one is hankering for success in the life of an individual, when one in fact is lit by the light of one's own awareness and had that encounter, how powerful was that? How meaningful was that? If it did not render you into another consciousness, then nothing happened. It doesn't matter how profound spiritual encounter was, you are better off, you are not better off than any Tom, Dick, and Harry who are living agnostic life and completely don't give a hoot about all these matters we gathered to discuss today. They squarely think it's an utter waste of time. You see? So that perspective also here is flipped and reversed. There's a lot of things out there that is utter waste of time, even if we go through tremendous ordeal of pursuing it. Because that's also in a way of life and how life structures and pans itself out. So rather what you're asking here, you see, in your second start of the second question, how do we keep grace when we receive it? That question itself is wrongly configured, man. You can't keep grace. Grace is not an object. You see? You can't keep grace. You can't build on grace either. Solar panels exist. Yes, you can utilize sunlight. That is possible. It's a technology. But in terms of technology of consciousness, you can only be transformed by grace. You can only give yourself to grace. You cannot take anything from grace. When that understanding dawns, then you begin to live life as that wandering tower or wandering Sufi. Just like for the Taoist, the one who doesn't want anything will receive it all. Yes, abstract, right? We've heard it all. Oh, I want to go to sleep when I hear these axioms. I've read it when I was in my mid-20s. Please give us something more tangible. Not Zen stories, no Tao stories. I hear you, and I'm with you. It has to be practical. And this is practical. When you realize that, and in the further unfoldment of the questions, we will inevitably touch, because these questions, whenever they come, they are all interlinked, as if stitched by the same needle going through all of them, that keeps them all on the same thread. So I'm not going to elaborate too much, because we will come back to some of this, what you have asked here, when we will respond to further questions, and this will become even more clear why that what was true thousands of years ago, that the one who doesn't want anything receives it all. You see? It is true to then, true to now. That energy, that frequency, that how it all settled, belongs precisely to that what is measured by how empty we are to receive. When we completely empty ourselves, when we can contain the entire world, and then we can decide what in that world is worthy of pursuing. So this is my encouragement for you, not to just rest on laurels of whatever you have experienced. Let's reconfigure this, see this as a grace, see this as being lucky for being reminded of that early enough in your life when you can still have plenty of time to allow that to unfold. But you cannot really measure success and achievement anymore by the same standards. And it's not that I'm saying that you do, but it's worth mentioning that because maybe some others will get this idea. The beauty of any of such encounter that you have described here is that it shows us the true value of human life, or what it contains. And then, of course, depending on what is at store, what is playing itself out as that very revelation itself, that goddess that reveals herself here. Because I don't want to reduce this to the level of the popularly spoken today by some speakers, would-be philosophers, when they speak about daimon, when they speak about this ancient Greek notion of a greater reality of archetypal force that one has relationship with. Some speakers, I even heard a very popular out there these days, Bernardo Kastrup speaks about relationship with daimon, and the way he speaks about it, it shows tremendous misunderstanding of what the archetypal force represents. Archetypal force is not someone we have a conversation over a cup of tea, nor someone with whom we can argue, nor someone with whom have polemized. Archetypal force is that what eclipses utterly and entirely the whole epiphenomena of whom we consider ourselves. It is not an example of a conversation between the hero like Odysseus with his patroness Athene in the Iliad. That's not the archetype of tantric proportions we're speaking about here. Maybe that's how it is what it is being reduced to, this daimon. That personal kind of archetypal force. If it's personal, it's not archetypal, because it's the other way around. You see? We cannot personalize the daimon. Nor can we fancy somehow having a relationship with that daimon, doing what the daimon wants. This is not how it works. So, final question, you put this, you kind of tie this. When you feel like you know what you want to do as a next step, right? And you add as per dharma, and are only mere inches away, but nothing materializing. What then? Well, nothing materializing. Well, what is it we're speaking about here? You see? I mean, I'd like to know more. What do you mean by nothing materializing and inches away? Maybe abandoning that whole framework of how you used to think, act, and operate in favor of a very different way of how you can function, even if you want to do something in related enterprises, in related professions, which I personally feel will be very difficult. So in other words, there is potentially something else in store for you, and you are still discovering it. You are still in the process of that being unveiled. I said that in the interview a few days ago with this young fellow, beautiful being from Lebanon for the program. It will be published, I believe, in the coming days. Eckhart Tolle, who is a millionaire, right? Landowner, property owner. He sat for 2 years on a bench in Oxford, not knowing what he will do upon his awakening. 2 years. Just sat on a bench as a mendicant, as a kind of like, not a homeless person, I believe, but Certainly not someone who is having some kind of idea of what he'll be doing. And it's just a proverbial example. We could argue, if not for these 2 years of not knowing what and how, which could be the most important years in terms of the integration of what his awakening was like, then there would be no Eckhart Tolle we know it today. You see? I'm just giving this as a hopefully inspiring, encouraging example.